My neighbor murdered my dog over 3 inches of dirt. What happened next? I didn't just get even, I obliterated his entire existence, stripped away everything he owned, and left him with nothing but regrets. And you know what keeps me up at night? Not guilt, not remorse, but the satisfaction of knowing I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat. Let me paint you a picture of the day my world collapsed. I pulled into my driveway after a brutal 10-hour shift, exhausted and ready to see the one face that always made everything better, my golden retriever, Bailey. But instead of her usual excited barking and tail wagging at the door, I heard something that still haunts me, a horrific, gut-wrenching whimpering coming from inside. I sprinted through that door faster than I've ever moved in my life, and there she was, my beautiful girl, convulsing violently on the kitchen floor, foam dripping from her mouth, her eyes rolling back in her head. I scooped her up, not caring about the vomit soaking into my clothes, and raced to the emergency vet, praying to every god I could think of. But it was too late. The vet took one look at her symptoms and knew immediately antifreeze poisoning. Someone had deliberately, methodically, fed my dog a lethal dose of one of the most painful poisons imaginable. Bailey died in my arms 20 minutes later, seizing and suffering. And I couldn't do a damn thing to save her. That wasn't just a dog dying, that was my entire support system crumbling. Bailey had been there through my divorce when my ex-wife took everything. She'd been there through my depression, literally pulling me out of bed on days I couldn't find a reason to get up. She was my therapist, my best friend, my family. And some monster had stolen her from me in the cruelest way possible. The police investigation moved fast, and every piece of evidence pointed to one person, Richard, my 58-year-old neighbor who'd been waging a psychological war against me for 6 months over our shared fence line. This man was obsessed, and I mean clinically obsessed, with property lines. He'd measured that fence with a tape measure at least 50 times that I'd witnessed. He'd sent me 23 certified letters, yes. I counted, claiming my fence encroached 3 inches onto his property. 3 inches. Not 3 feet, not 3 yards, but 3 microscopic inches that you couldn't even notice unless you were looking for them. He'd screamed at Bailey whenever she barked, called animal control on me for times with false noise complaints, and even tried to get my homeowners association to force me to remove the fence. But none of that worked, so he escalated. The police found circumstantial evidence he'd purchased antifreeze 2 days before Bailey died. His security camera mysteriously malfunctioned during the exact time frame of the poisoning, and a neighbor reported seeing him near my backyard gate that morning. But here's where the justice system failed me. The district attorney said they couldn't prosecute because it wasn't beyond reasonable doubt. No video evidence, no confession, just circumstantial breadcrumbs. They closed the case. Richard walked free, and I watched him smirk at me from his porch the day the police told me there'd be no charges. That smirk signed his death warrant. Grief does strange things to people. Some folks collapse inward and never recover. Others, like me, transform that grief into something else entirely: cold, calculated fury. I took a week off work, not to mourn, but to plan. I wasn't going to let Richard win. I wasn't going to let Bailey's death mean nothing. So I started digging, and what I found was absolutely beautiful. I hired Henderson and Associates, the most ruthless property litigation firm in the county. and spent $3,500 just for the initial consultation. I told them everything, showed them Richard's threatening letters, the police reports, all of it. Then I hired a certified professional surveyor, not just any surveyor, but the guy who'd done boundary disputes for 3 major corporations in our area. Cost me another $2,800, but it was worth every single penny. When those results came back, I literally laughed out loud for the first time since Bailey died. Richard's fence, 6 inches onto my property. His concrete driveway that he'd poured 5 years ago, 8 inches over the line. That precious garden shed, where he kept his expensive tools and lawn equipment, a full 7 inches onto my land. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. A man had murdered my dog over a fence he claimed was 3 inches on his property, while he'd been encroaching on mine by more than double that amount for years. But I didn't stop there. Oh no, I was just getting started. My lawyers started pulling permits, and guess what? Richard never got proper permits for that driveway or shed. To code violations right there. Then we subpoenaed his homeowner's insurance records and found he'd filed a claim 3 years ago for accidental property damage. That was actually intentional vandalism he'd committed. Self-insurance fraud. We pulled his phone records through legal discovery and found texts to his brother saying, "I'm going to make them regret ever moving in next to me, and that damn dog is going to learn its place." Then came the golden ticket. During the discovery phase, Richard was required to turn over personal documents, and my lawyers found his journal. This idiot kept a handwritten diary, and in it were entries like that. Mutt barked at me again today. Something needs to be done permanently, and researched solutions to the fence problem. The dog is the key to breaking their spirit. His own words, in his own handwriting, documenting his intent and planning. My lawyers called it the most gift-wrapped evidence they'd ever seen. We filed a comprehensive lawsuit with multiple causes of action: wrongful death of Bailey, intentional infliction of emotional distress, property encroachment, trespass, code violations, and punitive damages for malicious conduct. Richard got served at his workplace. I made sure of that. I wanted his co-workers to see him get handed those papers. He called me that night, screaming obscenities, threatening to countersue me for harassment. I recorded every word, and my lawyer added it to our evidence pile as witness intimidation. Richard hired a cheap lawyer, the kind you see on bus stop benches, because he genuinely believed I was bluffing. He thought I'd back down, that this was just an emotional reaction that would fizzle out. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I'd liquidated my savings, cashed in vacation days, picked up weekend shifts, and funneled every dollar into this legal war. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about justice for Bailey, and I was willing to sacrifice everything to get it. The trial was a masterclass in watching someone's life implode in slow motion. Richard showed up in a wrinkled suit, looking smug and confident, probably thinking his bus stop lawyer could somehow save him. My legal team came with 3 attorneys, a forensic expert, the surveyor, and a witness list that made the judge's eyebrows raise. We presented the survey evidence first, undeniable proof that Richard was the actual encroacher, not me. The jury saw the measurements, the photos, the property deeds. Then came the police reports and the vet's testimony about Bailey's suffering. The vet described in graphic medical detail how antifreeze poisoning works. how it destroys the kidneys, how the animal suffers immensely before death. Two jurors were crying. Richard's face went pale. Then my lawyers brought out his diary entries, blown up on massive poster boards for the entire courtroom to see. The dog is the key to breaking their spirit. The prosecutor Richard thought he'd escaped from couldn't touch him. But civil court has a much lower burden of proof, and that diary was a smoking gun. His lawyer tried to claim it was creative fiction and venting, but the jury wasn't buying it. Then we showed his texts, his threatening letters to me, his harassment pattern documented over 6 months. We brought in neighbors who testified about his erratic behavior and his obsession with the fence. The defense had nothing, no credible witnesses, no evidence, just Richard's own testimony where he claimed he was the victim. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. They awarded me $45,000 for Bailey's wrongful death and emotional distress, $12,000 for property damage and harassment, and $8,000 in attorney fees. But the real devastation came from the property judgment. The judge ordered Richard to remove his fence, driveway, and shed from my property within 60 days at his own expense. His contractor quoted $38.00 for removal and land restoration. Then he had to rebuild all of it on his actual property line, another $41,000. The code violations resulted in county fines totaling $6,500. His homeowners insurance company dropped him immediately when they discovered the evidence of intentional harm and prior insurance fraud, and they demanded repayment of his previous fraudulent claim, $11,000. But here's where it gets truly beautiful. Richard had to sell his house to pay these judgments. Under state property disclosure laws, he was required to inform potential buyers about the lawsuit, the poisoning allegations, and the property violations. His house was listed at $320,000, a fair market price. It sat on the market for 7 months before finally selling for $140,000, a $180,000 loss. Nobody wanted to buy the house where the dog killer lived. The stigma destroyed his property value. Last I heard, Richard is renting a cramped studio apartment on the bad side of town, working double shifts at age 58 to pay off the remaining judgments. And his adult children won't speak to him after learning what he did. The family who bought his former house has to rescue dogs. I made sure to introduce myself and tell them the whole story. Those dogs play in that yard every day, and every time I see them, I think of Bailey and smile. Some people say revenge is wrong, that it makes you as bad as the person who hurt you. Those people have never had someone steal their reason for living. Richard took everything from me that mattered, so I took everything from him that he valued. Was it worth the $50,000 I spent on legal fees? Absolutely. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. This isn't just my story, it's a message to anyone who thinks they can harm the innocent and walk away untouched. If this story fired you up and you believe justice is worth fighting for, then smash that subscribe button right now, because I've got dozens more stories where karma hits harder than a freight train. Hit the like button if you think Richard got exactly what he deserved, and drop a comment telling me, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have gone even further? Let me know what you think. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the good guys actually win. New revenge stories drop every week, don't miss them.